The training deck of the Eternal Vigilance hummed with energy as dozens of officers gathered to watch the demonstration. Jiho stood near the back of the observation area, his tablet in hand, taking notes on the power readings from the ship's energy grid. He was supposed to be monitoring the electrical systems during the exercise, making sure nothing overloaded. It was routine work, the kind that barely required attention. At the center of the deck stood Heijin, and she was magnificent. Her armor caught the overhead lights and seemed to glow from within. The Valtorian combat suit was a masterpiece of engineering. A smooth blend of metal and synthetic material that moved like a second skin. Silver and blue patterns ran across its surface, pulsing gently with each of her movements. The helmet covered her entire head, sleek and featureless except for a dark visor that hid her face. Heijin raised one armored hand, and the fingers flexed with perfect precision. The crowd murmured in appreciation. Valtorian armor was legendary across the galaxy. It linked directly to the wearer's nervous system, responding to thoughts as quickly as the body itself. In battle, a Valtorian warrior in full armor could move faster, hit harder, and survive longer than almost any other soldier in known space. The neural interface establishes connection in 0.3 seconds, the Valtorian instructor was explaining to the crowd. His name was Vraldhem, and his voice carried the proud tone of someone showing off superior technology. The suit becomes an extension of the warrior's own body. There is no delay, no learning curve. Think, and the armor responds. Heijin demonstrated by moving through a combat sequence. She spun, dropped, and rolled with fluid grace, despite the armor's bulk. Her movements were so smooth that Jiho found himself holding his breath. This was technology Earth could only dream of building. Tae-yang, the human captain of engineering, stood beside Jiho. He was older, with gray starting to show in his hair, and he watched the demonstration with the careful eyes of someone who understood machines. Impressive, he muttered. But complicated. Too many things that could go wrong. Jiho nodded but did not look away from Heijin. Everything complicated has things that can go wrong, he said quietly. The demonstration continued for another 10 minutes. Heijin showed off the armor's strength by lifting a training weight that would have required 3 unarmored soldiers to move. She showed its speed by crossing the deck in a blur of motion. She showed its durability by allowing another soldier to fire training rounds at her, the projectiles bouncing harmlessly off the armor's surface. Then the ship shuddered. It was brief, barely noticeable. Just a small vibration that ran through the deck plates. The lights flickered for half a second. Jiho's tablet beeped an alert, showing a strange energy spike across multiple systems. But before he could check what caused it, everything seemed to return to normal. Everything, except Heijin. She had frozen mid-step, one leg raised, her arms extended. For a moment, Jiho thought it was part of the demonstration. Then he saw the slight tremor in her armored frame. She was trying to move but could not. Vraldhem noticed immediately. He rushed forward, his own tablet out, scanning the armor's systems. Other Valtorian technicians joined him, their faces tight with concern. Jiho could hear Heijin's voice over the armor's external speakers. Calm, but strained. "I cannot move," she said. "The armor is not responding. Neural link is still active, but I have no control." The crowd began to whisper. Tae-yang moved closer, and Jiho followed. They stayed back, not wanting to interfere, but Jiho's engineer instincts were already working. He watched how the Valtorians moved around Heijin, saw how they connected diagnostic equipment to ports hidden in the armor's surface. "Emergency release protocol," Vraldhem ordered. A technician worked at a panel on Heijin's back. Nothing happened. He tried again, his fingers moving faster. Still nothing. "Manual override, section by section," Vraldhem said, his voice tighter now. 3 technicians tried simultaneously, each working on a different part of the armor. The suit did not respond. Heijin remained frozen in place, a statue of metal and trapped woman. An hour passed. Then 2. Jiho watched as the Valtorians tried everything in their protocols. They ran diagnostics that showed strange error codes. They attempted to reboot the neural interface remotely. They tried to inject emergency commands directly into the armor's computer core. Nothing worked. Heijin's voice remained steady. But Jiho could hear the strain growing. Being trapped in neural connection with a malfunctioning machine was not just physically uncomfortable, it was mentally exhausting. Her brain was still trying to communicate with the armor, receiving garbled feedback, creating a cycle of confusion that would only get worse with time. Taeyang stepped closer to Vraldham. "How is her life support?" he asked. "Functioning normally," Vraldham replied, without looking up from his tablet. "She can breathe. Temperature is controlled. But we must free her soon. The neural stress will become dangerous." What caused the malfunction? Unknown. The electromagnetic pulse from that spatial anomaly should not have affected the armor. Our systems have shielding against such events. Vraldham's voice carried frustration. This should not be possible. 4 hours became 5, then 6. More Valtorian specialists arrived, each trying their own approach. All failed. Haijin had stopped talking, conserving her energy, trusting her people to find a solution. Jiho stood in the same spot, watching everything. He noticed patterns in how the armor's surface lights pulsed. He saw how certain panels grew slightly warmer than others. He observed which diagnostic attempts caused small responses in the suit's energy signature, and which caused nothing at all. Taeyang noticed his young engineer's focus. "You see something?" he asked quietly. "Maybe," Jiho said. "I am not sure yet." At the 7-hour mark, Vraldham made an announcement that silenced the room. "We must cut her free. We will use precision plasma torches to remove the armor piece by piece. There is risk to the neural interface, possible brain damage, but we have no choice." The preparation began immediately. Technicians brought specialized cutting equipment, laying out tools with grim efficiency. Haijin was informed of the plan. Her voice, when she responded, was tired but accepting. "I understand the risks," she said. "Proceed." Jiho looked at Taeyang. The older man looked back. They had both seen the same things, noticed the same patterns. Taeyang gave a small nod. Jiho stepped forward, moving through the crowd of Valtorian technicians. He stopped a few feet from Vraldham, who was directing the placement of the cutting equipment. "Wait," Jiho said. His voice was not loud, but something in his tone made everyone pause. "Let me try." "I think I see the problem." Vraldham turned to look at him. The Valtorian's expression was not unkind, but it carried the weight of 7 hours of failure and the terrible decision he was about to make. "You are human," he said simply, as if that explained everything. "Yes," Jiho replied. "And I would like to try before you cut. What do you have to lose?" 10 minutes. "Give me 10 minutes." The room was silent. Taeyang moved to stand beside his engineer. "He is good," the captain said firmly. "Better than good. If he says he sees something, I believe him." Vraldham looked at Haijin, frozen and waiting. He looked at the cutting equipment, at the risk it represented. Then he looked back at Jiho and made a decision that would change everything. 10 minutes, he said. "Show me what you see." Jiho approached Haijin slowly, his hands empty of tools or diagnostic equipment. The Valtorian technicians watched him with expressions that mixed curiosity and doubt. Their own instruments lay scattered around, all useless against the problem. What could this human possibly do that they had not already tried? He stopped in front of the frozen warrior and spoke directly to her. "Hey Jin, can you hear me clearly?" "Yes." Her voice came through the external speakers. Tired, but alert. "I need you to tell me exactly what you felt when the armor locked. Not what you think happened mechanically. What you felt in your body, in your mind." There was a pause. This was not a question any of the Valtorian technicians had asked. They had focused on the armor's systems, not the person inside. "It was strange," Heejin said slowly. "When the ship shuddered, I felt the neural link flutter, like static in my thoughts. The armor tried to compensate, tried to stabilize the connection, but something went wrong. Now it feels like the armor is waiting for me, and I am waiting for it." We are both paused, both expecting the other to move first. Jiho nodded, even though she could not see it through her helmet. He reached out and placed his bare hand on her armored shoulder. Several Valtorians made sounds of surprise. Human skin against Valtorian technology, with no sensors or gloves between. "What is he doing?" someone whispered. Tae-young answered quietly. "His job." Jiho moved his hand slowly across the armor's surface, feeling the temperature, the vibrations, the tiny shifts in the material. He pressed gently against different sections, not hard enough to damage anything, just enough to sense how the armor responded. His eyes were half closed, concentrating. "The armor is made to move with you," he said to Heijin. "But right now, you are both trying to lead." The electromagnetic pulse damaged the synchronization. "Your nervous system is sending signals. The armor is sending signals. They do not match anymore, so both systems locked up to prevent damage." Vraldem stepped closer. "We know this," he said, trying to keep impatience from his voice. "We have run complete diagnostics. The corruption in the neural link is why we must cut her free. We cannot repair it while the connection is active. You cannot repair it with computers and protocols," Jiho agreed. He moved around Haijin, still touching the armor, reading it like a book written in metal and energy. "But the armor does not need to be repaired. It needs to be convinced that everything is normal again." "Convinced?" Vraldem's confusion was clear. "It is a machine, not a person." Jiho smiled slightly. "All complex machines have personality. They respond to how you treat them. On Earth, we learned this working with equipment that broke constantly. We did not have the luxury of perfect technology. We had to understand our machines, work with them, convince them to cooperate." He stopped in front of Heijin again. "I need some items. A manual pulse generator, thermal pads, and access to the food synthesizer." The Valtorians looked at each other. These requests made no sense. What did food have to do with armor malfunction? Tae-young spoke up. "Get him what he needs." While they waited for the items, Jiho explained his thinking. He kept it simple, knowing that his approach would sound strange to people who relied on systematic protocols. "The armor's neural interface is sophisticated," he said. "Too sophisticated. It has so many safety systems that they are fighting each other. The armor thinks disconnecting will harm Heijin. Her nervous system thinks the armor is damaged. Both are trying to protect each other by refusing to let go. So we have a deadlock," Vraldem said. "We know this. How does your approach break it?" "We do not break it. We calm it down. Make both sides think the emergency is over." A technician arrived with the items Jiho requested. The pulse generator was a simple tool, used for testing electrical circuits. The thermal pads were medical equipment for treating muscle injuries. Jiho took them and knelt beside Heijin. "This will take time," he warned, "and it will seem strange. But I need everyone to trust me and stay quiet. Any interference could ruin the process." He began by placing thermal pads on specific points of the armor. He chose locations carefully, areas where he knew major nerve clusters would be underneath. He activated the pads, warming them to body temperature. "Heijin, I need you to close your eyes and focus only on my voice," Jiho said softly. "Ignore the armor. Ignore the neural feedback. Just listen to me." "I am listening," she replied. "Breathe slowly, in for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, out for 4 counts. This is a human relaxation technique. It will calm your nervous system." He guided her through the breathing pattern, watching the armor's energy readings on a nearby display. Slowly, very slowly, the chaotic signals began to settle into a more regular rhythm. While Heijin breathed, Jiho used the pulse generator. He touched it to different points on the armor, sending gentle electromagnetic pulses. He was not trying to override anything or force a command. He was mimicking the natural rhythm of neural signals, adding his artificial pulses to the mix like someone humming along with a song. The Valtorian technicians watched in silence. This was nothing like their training. There were no diagnostic readouts telling Jiho what to do. No computer confirmations that his actions were correct. He was working purely by instinct and observation. "Subin, The Krellax tactical officer had joined the observers. Her species was known for their analytical minds, and she studied Jiho's technique with fascination. "He is creating harmony," she said quietly to Vraltham. "Not fixing what is broken, but helping the broken pieces find balance together." Minutes passed. Then an hour. Jiho never stopped talking to Heijin, keeping her calm, keeping her breathing steady. He adjusted the thermal pads, moved them to new locations, changed their temperature slightly. He varied the pulse generator's rhythm, responding to subtle changes in the armor's behavior that only he seemed to notice. "Your muscles must be tired," he said to Heijin. "I know you have been standing for many hours, but try not to think about moving yet. Just focus on being still, being calm. Let your body forget about the armor for a moment." "How can I forget?" Heijin asked, her voice carrying a hint of pain. "It is connected to my mind. That is why we are calming your mind first. Once your thoughts are peaceful, the armor will sense that. It will stop fighting. It will trust that the emergency is over." Jiho stood and went to retrieve the item from the food synthesizer. He had programmed it to create a specific nutritional compound, something with a strong scent and distinct flavor. When it was ready, he brought it back. "I am going to introduce this through your armor's emergency intake," he told Heijin. "It will smell and taste unusual, but it is safe. Your brain will respond to the sensory input. It will give your nervous system something new to process, something that has nothing to do with the malfunction." He carefully connected the compound to the armor's intake port. Heijin's helmet had emergency systems that could provide food and water during extended missions. Jiho activated the delivery. Heijin made a small sound. "That is strange." "What is it?" "A mixture that triggers specific neural responses," Jiho explained. "Calming responses. Your brain chemistry is changing. The armor will detect this change." He returned to using the pulse generator, but now his rhythm was different. He was matching it to Heijin's breathing, to the armor's energy patterns, creating a unified pulse that connected everything together. Vraltham watched the diagnostic displays. For the first time in hours, he saw something change. The error codes were not disappearing, but they were becoming less chaotic. The system was not fixed, but it was no longer screaming in confusion. "It is working," the Valtorian said, disbelief clear in his voice. "The neural stress levels are dropping." "Okay." Jiho did not respond. He was completely focused on his task, his hands moving with practiced precision, his voice steady as he continued to guide Heijin through breathing exercises. The crowd of observers barely dared to breathe themselves, afraid to break whatever fragile progress was being made. Time seemed to slow. Every second stretched out. Jiho made tiny adjustments, responding to changes so subtle that no instrument could measure them. He was reading the armor the way a musician reads an instrument, feeling its resonance, understanding its voice. Then, soft and clear, a sound everyone had been waiting for. Click. The neural interface disengaged, not forcefully, not with alarms or emergency protocols. It simply let go, convinced that everything was safe now. The armor's segments began to unlock, one by one, releasing Heijin from her prison. Heijin stumbled forward as the armor's final locks released. Her legs had been holding the same position for nearly 9 hours, and her muscles screamed in protest. Jiho caught her before she could fall, supporting her weight as the armor's segments continued to separate and fall away. The chest plate came loose. The arm sections disconnected. The leg guards dropped to the deck with heavy thuds. Within seconds, Heijin was free, standing in the flexible undersuit that all Valtorians wore beneath their armor. She leaned heavily against Jiho, her breathing rapid and shallow. "Medical team," Taeyang called out, and several personnel rushed forward with a transport chair. They eased Heijin into the chair, checking her vital signs immediately. Her heart rate was elevated. Her muscles were exhausted, but otherwise she appeared unharmed. No neural damage, no psychological trauma beyond the stress of her long imprisonment. The doctors began administering fluids and muscle relaxants, while Heijin closed her eyes and simply breathed. Jiho stepped back, suddenly aware that he was shaking. The tension of the last hour caught up with him all at once. Taeyang gripped his shoulder firmly, steadying him. "Well done," the captain said quietly. "Very well done." Around them, the Valtorian technicians stood in stunned silence. They looked at their diagnostic equipment, then at the freed warrior, then at the young human who had accomplished what all their advanced technology could not. Vraldem approached Jiho slowly, his expression complex. "I do not understand what you did," the Valtorian said honestly. "I watched every step, but I do not understand how it worked." Jiho took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. His legs felt weak, so he sat down on a nearby equipment case. "You tried to fix the armor's systems," he explained. "That was the right approach for a mechanical problem. But this was not just mechanical. It was also biological, psychological. The armor and Heijin were both stuck in a fear response." "Fear response?" Vraldem looked skeptical. "The armor is a machine. It does not feel fear." "Not emotion," Jiho agreed. "But it has survival protocols, yes? Safety systems designed to prevent harm. When the electromagnetic pulse corrupted the neural sync, those safety systems activated. They detected danger. The armor locked down to protect Heijin. Her nervous system locked up to protect itself from what it thought was damaged equipment. Both were trying to help, but they created a loop that trapped them both." Subin had joined them, her Krell axe features thoughtful. "So you did not repair the corruption in the data," she said. "You made both systems believe the danger had passed." "Exactly." Jiho nodded. "I could not fix the actual error codes. Your technicians were right that those were corrupted beyond simple repair. But I could change the context around them. By calming Heijin's nervous system, by introducing normal sensory inputs, by creating rhythmic patterns that felt safe and regular, I convinced both the armor and the person that it was okay to let go." Taeyang addressed the gathered crowd. "This is human engineering philosophy," he said. "We learned it because our technology was unreliable. A human mechanic does not just know how machines work. They know how machines fail. They understand the psychology of complex systems. They learn to coax cooperation instead of demanding it." One of the younger Valtorian technicians spoke up. "But this seems so imprecise. How could you know it would work? What if you had made the situation worse?" Jiho shrugged. "I could not make it worse. You were about to cut through the armor with plasma torches. That carried real risk of brain damage. My method was gentler. Even if it failed, it would have left Heijin in the same condition as before, and you could still have cut her free. But you did not fail," Vraldem said slowly. "Against all probability, your imprecise, intuitive method succeeded." "Not against probability," Jiho corrected gently. "It succeeded because complex systems respond to understanding. Humans learned this truth over centuries of working with machines that were barely functional. We had to develop intuition because we could not rely on perfection." The medical team finished their initial assessment of Heijin. The lead doctor, a Valtorian named Dalren, approached Vraldem with his report. "No neural damage detected. Muscle fatigue is severe but temporary. She will make a full recovery within 2 days. It is remarkable. If the armor had been cut away while the neural link was active, the feedback surge would have caused significant brain damage." The weight of those words settled over everyone. They all understood how close they had come to disaster. Vraldem looked at Jiho with new respect. "You saved her," he said simply. "Not just freed her. Saved her from harm our own procedure would have caused." Jiho felt uncomfortable with the praise. "You would have saved her too. Your way was riskier, but you would have done everything possible to minimize the damage." "Perhaps." Vraldem did not look convinced. "But your way was better." News of the incident spread through the ship rapidly. By the time Jiho returned to his quarters that evening, exhausted and ready to sleep for 12 hours, he already had messages waiting. The Krell Axe Engineering Division wanted to schedule a meeting. The Etherian Medical Corps requested a demonstration of his adaptive diagnostic techniques. Even the ship's captain, a stern Valtorian named Coravel, sent a brief note of commendation. Taeyang visited him before he could sleep. The older man brought coffee, real Earth coffee from the engineering section's private supply, and sat down across from his young subordinate. "You are about to become famous," Taeyang said with a slight smile. "Other species will want to study human methods now. They will want to understand how we think." "I just did what made sense," Jiho protested. "Anyone could have tried the same approach, but no one else did. They could not, because their training taught them different patterns." Taeyang sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "Humanity spent 2 centuries reverse engineering alien technology after we joined the coalition. We studied Valtorian computers, Krellax weapons, Aetherian medical devices. We learned how all of it worked. But they never learned from us, because they assumed we had nothing to teach. Now they know differently," Jiho said. "Now they are beginning to learn." Taeyang set down his cup. "This is important, Jiho. Not just this one incident, but what it represents. The coalition is thousands of species, all bringing their own strengths. But sometimes strengths can become weaknesses. The Valtorians are so advanced that they forgot how to improvise. Their technology works so well that they never needed to develop the skills you use today." Jiho thought about Haijin, trapped in her perfect armor. "So what happens now?" "Now you teach," Taeyang said. "The coalition will ask you to share your knowledge. You will train others in human engineering methods. It will not be easy. Many will resist. They will think our ways are primitive or inefficient." "Are they wrong?" Taeyang laughed. "Our ways are primitive and inefficient compared to their technology. But they work. They work because they are flexible, adaptable, creative. Those qualities matter more than people realize." 3 days later, Heejin was released from medical care. Her first action upon regaining full mobility was to find Jiho. He was in the engineering bay, working on routine maintenance of the ship's power distribution systems. She entered quietly, still moving a bit stiffly but recovering well. "Jiho," she called out, and he turned to see her standing there. He set down his tools and approached her. Up close, without the armor, she was smaller than he expected. Valtorians were generally taller than humans, but Heijin was only slightly above average height. Her features were sharp and elegant, her eyes a striking amber color that marked her as someone from the northern clans of her homeworld. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Better. Tired, but better." She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. "I came to thank you. Not just for freeing me, for doing it safely, for caring about more than just solving the problem. Anyone would have done the same." "No." Heejin shook her head firmly. "The Valtorian approach would have cut me free and accepted the damage as necessary. You found a way that protected me. That is different." She looked past him at the equipment he had been working on. "I have been thinking about what happened, about how my people design our technology. We build for perfection, for reliability, but we do not build for failure. When something goes wrong, we have protocols, but we do not have imagination. Your technology is far superior to ours," Jiho said honestly. "Earth is still decades behind Valtorian engineering. In some ways," Heejin acknowledged. "But you understand something we have forgotten. Machines are not just tools. They are partners. They need to be understood, not just commanded." She smiled slightly. "You treated my armor with more respect than our own technicians did. You listened to it. You worked with it, instead of against it." Jiho felt his face warm. "I just did what felt right. And that is the difference." Haijin extended her hand in the human gesture of friendship. "Thank you, Jiho. You have taught me something valuable." He shook her hand, and in that moment, he understood that something had shifted. This was not just about one armor malfunction. This was about how different species could learn from each other, how diverse approaches could strengthen everyone. The future of the coalition was beginning to change, one human engineer at a time. 2 weeks after the incident with Heijin's armor, the Eternal Vigilance held a formal debriefing session. The conference room was filled with officers from multiple species, all gathered to hear about what had happened and what lessons could be learned from it. Jiho sat uncomfortably at the main table, wishing he could be back in engineering where things made sense. Vraltham stood at the front of the room, presenting the technical analysis of the armor malfunction. Charts and diagrams floated in holographic display above the table, showing the cascade of errors that had locked the system. His presentation was thorough and professional, detailing every failed attempt at repair before Jiho's intervention. The human engineer's approach was unconventional, Vraltham said, his tone neutral. By all our training and protocols, it should not have worked. But it did work, and we must understand why. He brought up recordings of Jiho's procedure, showing how he had used thermal pads, pulse generators, and breathing exercises to calm both He-Jin and her armor. To Jiho's embarrassment, Vraltham analyzed each step with careful respect, pointing out the logic behind methods that had seemed random at the time. The key difference, Vraltham concluded, was that the human did not treat this as a purely technical problem. He understood it as a system issue involving both machine and biology. Our Valtorian approach was too narrow. We focused on the armor and forgot about the warrior inside it. Captain Coravel, sitting at the head of the table, listened with sharp attention. She was an imposing figure, even among Valtorians, with decorations that spoke of decades of distinguished service. When Vraltham finished, she turned to Jiho. "Engineer Jiho," she said formally, "would you explain your thinking during the procedure? Not the technical steps, but why you chose that approach." Jiho cleared his throat nervously. Speaking to a room full of senior officers was far more frightening than working on broken machinery. "I grew up working in my family's repair shop on Earth," he began. "We fixed everything from farming equipment to old spacecraft systems. Most of what we worked on was old, damaged, or poorly maintained. It broke down constantly." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "My father taught me that machines have personalities. Not consciousness, but patterns. A machine that is well treated responds differently than one that is mistreated. A machine that is understood works better than one that is simply commanded. When something breaks, you cannot always force it to work. Sometimes you have to convince it." Subin, the Krellax officer, leaned forward with interest. "Can you explain that concept more clearly? How does one convince a machine?" "By understanding what it is trying to do," Jiho replied. He-Jin's armor was not malfunctioning because it was broken. It was malfunctioning because it was trying to protect her. Its safety systems were doing exactly what they were designed to do. The problem was that those systems had incorrect information about the danger. So instead of fighting the safety systems, I gave them correct information. I showed the armor that everything was safe. Taeyang spoke up from his position beside Jiho. "This is fundamental to human engineering philosophy. We design our systems to fail safely, and we train our engineers to work with failure instead of against it. When we joined the coalition and started working with your advanced technology, we brought this philosophy with us." An Etherian medical officer raised a delicate hand. "But surely this approach is too slow for emergency situations. If someone is dying, we cannot spend hours calming a machine's safety systems." "You are right," Jiho admitted. "My method took time. In a life-or-death emergency with no time to spare, cutting through the armor would have been necessary. But this was not that situation. He-Jin's life support was functioning. She was stable. We had time to try a careful approach before resorting to the dangerous one. That is another human quality," Taeyang added. "Patience. We learned to be patient with our unreliable technology, because rushing often made things worse. Sometimes, the fastest solution is not the best solution." The discussion continued for over an hour. Officers from different species asked questions, shared their own experiences, and debated the merits of various engineering philosophies. Jiho found himself relaxing as the conversation became more natural, less formal. These were people who genuinely wanted to understand, not just judge. Captain Coravel brought the meeting to a close with an announcement. "Based on this incident, and the valuable insights it has provided, I am authorizing a new initiative. Human engineers will be integrated into all critical technical teams aboard this vessel. They will not replace existing personnel, but will work alongside them, providing alternative perspectives and approaches. She looked directly at Jiho. Engineer Jiho, you will lead this integration. You will train our staff in human problem-solving methods and learn from our advanced technical knowledge. This exchange of skills will benefit everyone. Jiho felt his stomach drop. Leading a department-wide initiative was far beyond anything he had expected. He glanced at Taeyang, who smiled encouragingly. I will do my best, Captain, Jiho said, because there was nothing else he could say. After the meeting ended, several officers approached Jiho with questions and requests. A Krellax tactical specialist wanted to discuss human approaches to weapons maintenance. An Etherian engineer was curious about how humans diagnosed problems without advanced sensors. Even Vraldham stayed to talk, his earlier skepticism replaced with genuine interest. I have been reviewing Earth's engineering history, the Valtorian said. Your species built remarkable things with very limited resources. Spacecraft that reached other planets using computers less powerful than a modern child's toy. Structures that stood for thousands of years without advanced materials. It is impressive. We did what we had to do, Jiho replied. We did not have a choice, and that forced you to be creative. Vraldham nodded slowly. Valtorians have not faced such limitations in centuries. Our technology advanced so far that we no longer needed to improvise. Perhaps we lost something important in that process. Over the following days, Jiho began working with teams across the ship. He taught Valtorian technicians how to diagnose problems by touch and sound, instead of relying only on sensors. He showed Krellax engineers how to adapt tools for purposes they were not designed for. He demonstrated for Etherian specialists how to think creatively when standard procedures failed. The results were mixed at first. Some officers embraced the new approaches eagerly. Others were resistant, uncomfortable with methods that seemed imprecise and unreliable. But slowly, attitudes began to shift. A Valtorian repair team used human troubleshooting techniques to fix a sensor array that had been malfunctioning for weeks. A Krellax weapons specialist adapted a maintenance tool in an unexpected way and solved a persistent jamming issue. Small successes accumulated, building confidence in the human approach. Heijin became one of Jiho's strongest advocates. She attended every training session he held, asking sharp questions and challenging him to explain his reasoning clearly. She pushed him to teach better, to find ways of communicating that worked for different species and mindsets. You saved my life, she told him during one session. Now I want to help save others by spreading what you know. One evening, Jiho found himself alone in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. The Eternal Vigilance was on patrol near the outer rim, far from any settled worlds. Space stretched endlessly in all directions, beautiful and cold. Heijin joined him, moving quietly to stand beside him at the viewport. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching a distant nebula paint the darkness with colors. Do you ever wonder what else we might learn from each other? Heijin asked. Your people? My people? All the species in the coalition. We have worked together for decades. But have we truly learned from one another? I think we are starting to, Jiho said, slowly, because of one armor malfunction. Heijin shook her head with a slight smile. It seems like such a small thing to change so much. Small things often matter more than we realize, Jiho replied. On Earth, there is a saying about how a small change in one place can cause large effects elsewhere. A butterfly flapping its wings can eventually cause a storm on the other side of the world. Is that scientifically accurate? Jiho laughed. Probably not. But the idea is true. Small actions have consequences that grow over time. Jiho. Heijin turned to face him. Then let us make sure the consequences are good ones. Let us teach others what we have learned. Not just about engineering, but about working together. About respecting different approaches, about being willing to try new things, even when they seem strange. That is a bigger goal than fixing armor, Jiho said. Yes. Heijin's amber eyes were serious. But I think it is the right goal. The coalition is strong because we are diverse, but we will be stronger when we truly learn from our diversity instead of just tolerating it. Jiho nodded slowly. She was right. The armor incident had opened a door, but walking through that door would require effort from everyone. It would require humans to share their knowledge freely, and other species to be willing to learn from a younger, less advanced civilization. We should start by creating a formal training program, he said, his mind already working through the logistics. Not just on this ship, but across the whole coalition fleet. Standardized curricula that teach human engineering philosophy alongside traditional technical training. And we should document case studies, Heejin added, warming to the idea. Real examples of when human approaches solved problems that standard methods could not. Evidence that will convince the skeptics. They talked late into the night, planning and dreaming. What had started as one engineer freeing one warrior from trapped armor was growing into something much larger, a movement to change how the entire coalition thought about problem-solving, cooperation, and the value of different perspectives. Outside the viewport, the stars continued their eternal dance. And inside the ship, two people from different worlds worked together to build a better future. 3 weeks after Jiho freed Heijin from her armor, the Eternal Vigilance received an unusual signal. It came from deep space, far from any known shipping lanes or settlements. The signal was weak and irregular, broadcasting on frequencies that no coalition species used. Captain Koraval assembled her senior staff to review the findings. Subin presented the analysis, her Krellax precision evident in every detail. The signal appears to be a distress call, she explained. But the pattern does not match any known language or protocol. We detected it only because our sensors were running extended scans of this sector. Origin? Koraval asked. A derelict vessel, drifting approximately 3 light hours from our current position. Scans show minimal power signatures, but the ship appears to be intact. No identification markers visible. Taeyang studied the data with concern. If the ship is unknown, we should proceed with caution. It could be a trap or carry contamination. Agreed, Koraval said. But we cannot ignore a possible distress call. Prepare a reconnaissance team. She paused, considering. Include human personnel. If this situation requires unconventional thinking, they should be present from the start. 6 hours later, a shuttle carrying a mixed team approached the derelict vessel. Jiho sat beside Heejin, who wore her armor again, fully functional, and now equipped with additional manual override systems that Jiho had helped design. Subin commanded the team, with 3 Valtorian security officers and 2 more human engineers completing the group. The derelict was unlike anything in Coalition databases. Its hull seemed to be a fusion of organic and mechanical materials, flowing in curves that suggested growth rather than construction. No windows were visible, no obvious engines or weapons. It simply existed, strange and silent against the stars. Life signs? Subin asked the sensor technician. Unclear. Something is inside, but the readings are confused. The hull material is interfering with our scans. They docked carefully, using magnetic clamps since the derelict's hull had no standard docking ports. The airlock matched pressure without difficulty, suggesting the ship's environmental systems still functioned at some level. Jiho was the first to step through the airlock into the derelict's interior. His helmet light cut through darkness, revealing corridors that curved organically. Walls that seemed to pulse with faint bioluminescence. The air was breathable according to his suit sensors, but he kept his helmet on as a precaution. "This is incredible," one of the Valtorian officers whispered. "I have never seen anything like this technology." They moved deeper into the ship, following the distress signal. It grew stronger as they advanced, leading them toward what appeared to be the vessel's center. The corridors branched in patterns that made no logical sense to their understanding of ship design. But Jiho noticed something. "The branches follow growth patterns," he said, "like tree roots or blood vessels. This ship was not built. It was grown." Heijin walked beside him, her armor's sensors recording everything. If it was grown, who grew it? And where are they now? They found the answer in a chamber at the ship's core. A single figure stood frozen in the center, enclosed in a translucent cocoon of the same material as the ship's hull. The being inside was vaguely humanoid but clearly alien, with elongated limbs and features that suggested an entirely different evolutionary path. Stasis, Subin concluded after scanning the cocoon. But the system is failing. Life signs are present, but weakening. The Valtorian technicians immediately began analyzing the cocoon's structure, trying to understand how it worked. After an hour of study, their conclusion was grim. "We cannot open it safely," the lead technician reported. "The technology is completely foreign. Any attempt to force entry could kill the occupant. We should return to the ship and request specialist support." Jiho circled the cocoon slowly, studying it from every angle. He reached out and touched its surface, feeling warmth and a subtle vibration. The material responded to his touch, the bioluminescence brightening slightly. "It is alive," he said softly. "Not just the person inside. The whole ship, the cocoon, everything. It is all one living system." "How does that help us?" one of the security officers asked. "We still cannot open it without understanding the technology." Jiho thought about Heijin's armor, about the neural connection that had locked when the system became confused. He thought about how he had resolved that situation not by force but by communication and understanding. "Maybe we do not need to understand the technology," he said. "Maybe we just need to talk to it." The others looked skeptical, but Heijin stepped forward. "Explain. If this ship is alive, if it is all one connected system, then it probably has some form of awareness. Not intelligence like ours, but awareness of its state. It knows the person inside the cocoon is dying. It is sending a distress signal because it wants help, but does not know how to ask for it clearly." Subin's analytical mind latched onto the idea. "You propose to communicate with the ship itself. But how? We have no shared language, no common reference points." "We have biology," Jiho replied. "All living things respond to certain stimuli. Temperature, light, vibration, chemical signals. We can try different inputs and see what the ship responds to." It was a long shot, but they had no better options. The coalition specialists were days away, and the being in the cocoon might not have days. Jiho began working immediately, jury-rigging equipment from the shuttle to produce various forms of stimulation. He started with simple vibrations, tapping patterns against the ship's walls. The bioluminescence flickered in response. Not random, but following patterns. He changed the rhythm, trying different sequences. The ship's responses changed accordingly. "It is communicating," Heijin said, wonder in her voice. "Look at how the light patterns shift when Jiho changes his input." For hours, Jiho and the team worked to establish rudimentary communication with the ship. It was frustrating and slow, with more failures than successes. But gradually, patterns emerged. Certain rhythms produced consistent responses. Certain frequencies caused the cocoon material to thin or thicken. Jiho's fellow human engineers joined the effort, bringing their own creative approaches. One suggested using heat signatures to create images, showing the ship what they wanted to do. Another proposed introducing chemical compounds from the shuttle's synthesizer, letting the ship taste their intentions. The Valtorian and Krellax team members watched this chaotic collaboration with fascination. There was no formal procedure, no organized protocol. The humans were improvising wildly, trying dozens of different approaches simultaneously, learning from each failure and building on each small success. Then Heijin's armor malfunctioned again. The derelict's strange energy fields interfered with her neural link, causing the same type of synchronization error as before. She froze mid-movement, and Jiho's heart sank. Not again. Not here, far from the ship's resources. But Heijin's voice was calm through the armor's speakers. "Jiho, I know what to do. Talk me through it." He guided her through the process he had used before. But this time, he did not need to do the work himself. Heijin executed each step, manually adjusting her own neural rhythms, using the breathing techniques he had taught her. The armor's manual override systems engaged smoothly, and within minutes she had freed herself. The Valtorian officers stared in amazement. Subin made a clicking sound of approval. She learned the human method. She adapted. We all can adapt, Heejin said, removing her helmet briefly. That is what Jiho has been teaching us. Technology is not about perfection. It is about understanding and flexibility. Inspired by Heejin's success, the team redoubled their efforts with the cocoon. They combined human intuition with Valtorian precision, Krell axe analysis with human creativity. Jiho coordinated the effort, but everyone contributed ideas. Finally, after 8 hours of patient work, they found the right combination. A sequence of vibrations paired with specific chemical signals and gentle heat application. The cocoon began to open, not forced but choosing to release its occupant because it understood help had arrived. The alien inside stirred, weak but alive. The medical team immediately began care, stabilizing the unfamiliar biology as best they could. The being's eyes opened, revealing consciousness that was undeniably intelligent and aware. Subin attempted communication using the Coalition's standard first contact protocols. To everyone's surprise, the alien responded, not with words, but with bioluminescent patterns on its skin that matched the ship's language. Jiho's improvised communication method had not just saved the alien, it had given them a way to talk. The journey back to the Eternal Vigilance took hours. The alien, whom they learned was named something that translated roughly to root singer, gradually regained strength. Through patient communication using light and vibration, they learned that root singer's species was ancient and reclusive, dwelling in deep space far from Coalition territories. Their ship had been damaged by the same spatial anomaly that had affected Heejin's armor, leaving root singer trapped in failing stasis. When they returned to the carrier, the entire crew gathered to witness first contact with a new species. Captain Koravel formally welcomed root singer and promised the Coalition's assistance in returning them home. But before any of that, root singer approached Jiho. The alien's bioluminescent patterns conveyed gratitude and respect in a way that transcended language. Through Subin's translation of the light patterns, root singer's message was clear. You speak to living things as living things. This is wisdom my people value. This is wisdom the galaxy needs. In the days that followed, Jiho was promoted to Chief of Adaptive Engineering, heading a new department that combined personnel from multiple species. The department's mission was to solve problems that traditional approaches could not handle, to explore unconventional solutions, to learn from every species' unique perspective. Heijin became his second in command, her experience with both Valtorian precision and human flexibility making her ideal for the role. Together, they began training Coalition engineers across the fleet, spreading the philosophy that had saved her life and helped them communicate with an entirely alien species. The department adopted a motto, suggested by Root Singer, and translated into Coalition standard. When perfection fails, understanding prevails. Jiho stood in his new office, looking out at the stars. The view was the same as from the observation deck, but his perspective had changed. He thought about the journey that had led here, from a small repair shop on Earth to this moment, leading a coalition-wide initiative. Taeyang visited him, bringing the traditional coffee. The older man smiled with pride. You have done well. Better than I imagined when I first met you. I just helped someone who was stuck, Jiho said modestly. Everything else grew from that. That is how all great changes begin, Taeyang replied. One small act of kindness and creativity. One person refusing to give up. One human showing the galaxy that there is more than one way to solve a problem. He raised his coffee cup in a toast to humanity's gift to the stars. Not superior weapons or faster ships, but the simple willingness to try something new when the old ways fail. Jiho touched his cup to Taeyang's. Outside the window, the Eternal Vigilance moved through space, carrying within it the seeds of change. A coalition learning to value diversity not just in species but in thought. A galaxy beginning to understand that wisdom could come from the most unexpected sources. And at the center of it all, a young human engineer who had learned to speak to machines with patience and respect, who had freed a warrior from her armor and in doing so had helped free countless minds from rigid thinking. The future stretched ahead, full of challenges and unknowns. But now the coalition faced that future with new tools, new perspectives, and new confidence that no problem was truly unsolvable, as long as they remained willing to learn from each other. In the training room down the corridor, a mixed-species class was in session. Hai-Jin stood at the front, teaching the next generation of engineers the human approach to complex systems. Her voice was clear and confident as she began the lesson with words that had become foundational to the new department. Every machine, no matter how advanced, is a puzzle waiting to be understood. And every puzzle has a solution if you are willing to think differently. Today, we will learn not just how to fix what is broken, but how to understand why it broke and how to convince it to work with us again. And somewhere in deep space, Root Singer's people received the message that one of their own had been rescued by a young species with an unusual gift for understanding. They listened with interest to the story of humans and their creative approach to problems. They began to wonder what other wisdom might exist among the younger civilizations of the galaxy. The seeds of change had been planted. Now they would grow,